Hello, welcome to the second installment on the topic of competence. Today, we will be addressing the human end, that is coaching and counseling clients and teaching classes. With me are my lion-hearted colleagues, Academy staffer Christy Benson, new author Emily Priestley of Wild at Heart Dog Training in British Columbia, and Lisa Skavinsky of Dog Educated in Rochester, New York. Just a quick introduction, and this is one of my pet peeves, which is that a frequent bedmate of trainers who are not properly trained to do their jobs is client blaming. So one of the flags that we might have if we're unsure whether we're fully trained to do behavior modification and counsel clients is that we find ourselves finding fault with the client. They didn't do the homework, they have the wrong attitude, they're myth adherent, they're not sufficiently compliant, they're not sufficiently committed to their dog, and so on. So let's talk about the skills we need to coach and counsel clients first, and then we'll get into class teaching in due course. So the first thing I think we wanted to talk about was this whole issue of self-knowledge, knowing our own limitations, which is tricky by definition, because if you're in practice, you must view yourself as competent.
I think this topic is of particular interest to me because I think maybe because I'm trained as an anthropologist. And one of the things that I like anthropologizing is myself. You know, I'm a human, I'm a human stimulus to myself. So I find it interesting to be like, oh, this is making me angry. Why is this making me angry? So just do a little bit of an assessment of myself. And I think it's hard to sort of accept our own limitations of knowledge, especially if we've already embarked upon a particular task. So I have certainly taken dogs that are outside of my skill set at that time when I was a new trainer. Luckily, I have Eugene who I could go to and get help, but I mean, I think that at that moment, what I needed to do was just take a step back and say, am I actually able to handle the complexity of this case with my current skill set and experience, and if I have a sort of I'm not sure, instead of just bullying forth and saying, well, I took the money, I'm going to do it, what I needed to do and what I hopefully did, was be like, no, I need help here. So I think it behooves every dog trainer, especially someone who hasn't graduated from an accredited program with that covers all of the topics that we need, which we're covering in these sessions today, to be able to really do that sort of deep dive into self-assessment. And I know one of the things that we batted around before this conversation was just the one technique, like the one trick pony, I guess you could call it. So if you've learned a technique, say a DRI, a particular DRI, and you're applying that in every case, then that's a bit of a flag. That is a bit of a flag to us that there's probably a competence issue. And I'm not saying this to be like, you bad. I'm just saying this should, like in my life, I've had flags to me that I need help. That should be a flag to you. If you're like, if you really have one technique that you've learned, even if you've learned it really well and you're applying it to every single case type, then, I think there's a bit of a problem. So I guess that's sort of like a two-part approach. It's not just valid to question yourself, it's important. We don't have to slide into Dunning-Kruger. We can still be like,
self-anthropology is tough though.
it is, yeah.
I think most people, it's hard to self-anthropologize.
It is, for sure.
So what if somebody doesn't have one things that worries me when I look at sort of dog trainer forums is a certain amount of blind leading the blind. Somebody who's maybe got the one technique panacea, or they're clearly not up to a certain case, will sort of vomit out to the case and say, tips anybody? And then other people sort of weigh in with, well, what about this? Maybe try this, or have you asked this? And everybody's kind of feeling their way. They don't have standard operating procedures. They don't know how to approach cases, and it's this sort of, and it's this culture of it's okay to kind of flail and maybe try this. And that's kind of worrisome. And I never see anybody in those things saying, geez, I wonder if any of us should be doing this stuff, because we clearly don't know
I
how to
think
proceed here.
that is a question more of a bigger question about our profession rather than the specific question of competence about
client counseling.
But yes, I agree.
Right.
Yeah. And I know in later sessions,
how about helping clients decide, knowing what's normal? So our next topic was going to be helping clients understand what's normal behavior but undesired. It needs modification management, both or neither, based on the case specifics and the labor estimates. this is a pretty big can of worms, isn't it? Because it means you have an idea of what normal behavior is, and you have criteria for when you're going to be prescriptive, and when you're going to let the client make the call about management, and training and so on. Does anybody want to sort of, tackle, sort of what they're seeing out there, and how people might decide or understand whether they're up to it vis-a-vis, you know, teasing apart normal from not normal behavior?
Well, I am a huge advocate for going into a session knowing the difference between normal and not normal, or atypical and atypical behaviors. And I know we're going to talk about this, but like when to raise flags and send that animal to a veterinarian. And like trainers, I find it one of the scariest issues around competency. And I would say it's malpractice, and it needs to be referred to as something more serious than just like, oh, that person is clunky in their case and maybe not super competent. It's malpractice when you're diagnosing medical conditions and you're not a veterinarian. So it's for me, that's really scary. And I see that a lot. I just made a Facebook post about this today. But when you're going into a case or you're working with a client, I sometimes cringe at just like the level of case of sessions that somebody is like plugging their client through, and like, sometimes thousands of dollars being spent on things that I think probably aren't getting us to the root of the issue. And maybe we're like, I think sometimes wasting our skills. We could go in and sort of get right to actually like working to resolve the issue. And some of these things that I see trainers taking money for many, many, many sessions are things that we could even teach a client to do as homework. Like they're not maybe the most effective. So just making sure that you're understanding what you're working with and referring out when needed, but then also like making sure that you're being realistic in terms of how you're spending your clients' dollars.
So this is sort of one of I think it's a bugaboo for all of us, which is the efficiency issue. Understanding that client bandwidth is a precious and limited resource, and therefore cutting to the chase.
Yeah. And I think like our clients often ask us questions that are outside of our lane, medical and nutrition
Absolutely.
questions, and maybe even bigger, like legal, I don't know, questions, right? That we don't know. And I think part of being a competent counselor is being able to take those, deal with them, but not follow the client into well, I had a dog who had a UTI once, so
what I do is this.
Yeah, to be able to just say, oh, you know what, that's a great question for your veterinarian, and be able to handle that without making the client feel stupid.
Gracefully, right?
Yeah,
right. That the client shouldn't have asked, or
yeah, exactly. So I think something that maybe hasn't come up in our pre-discussions, but I think is important to acknowledge, is that humans learn in a specific way and are comfortable in a specific type of interaction, and that's a discipline, and you can learn that. So it's not like, yes, some people
you have to be naturally sort of good with people.
Yeah, and to be able to sort of ignore that and say, well, I don't need to learn how to deal with people, I think is a competence X for me. You need to learn how people learn and how to gently coach people if you want to be a dog trainer, if you want to take human clients.
Yeah, and that's like anything else. It's a set of skills and a set of sort of how to do things. One of the things that you just brought up, the efficiency thing, is one of my pet peeves is the giving clients general principles rather than concrete steps and plans, and expecting sort of the client to construct the training from first principles. Has anybody seen that, or has it just?
Yes, I've seen that, and I've seen, and by seen meaning clients will come to me, and when I've asked what they've worked on with their prior trainer, when they've had one, sometimes they'll forward me the notes, and it will just be pages and pages from the internet, which isn't even something they made themselves, just
not very well curated, huh?
I've seen people I've seen where and heard from clients very frequently about trainers who have told them to stop using whatever behavior that the vet has actually prescribed and tell them, well, you know, you really need to stop using Prozac. That's going to make your dog bite somebody. It's going to cause aggression, or this drug doesn't address aggression. It addresses only fear. Like, way out of their lane. Absolutely no business talking, but wrong for starters. Forget about the fact that they're wrong, but that's criminal. You're not a vet. I've never gone beyond saying, you know, I think, you know, given the degree of fear that Fido is experiencing, I think it's a really good idea to talk to your vet about whether or not he is a candidate for behavioral meds. That may be something that can help, but that's a conversation for you and your vet. And if you need, I'm happy to speak to your vet or write a letter for you. So just based on what my observations of the behaviors are. But as Jean, you were saying, I do think there's so many times, you know, earlier when you were saying, knowing when what you're looking at, what the criteria is, you get clients that come to you and say, and literally freaked out, fearful because their dog has growled, their puppy's growled, if there's like, even if it's minor resource guarding, and then there are trainers who don't know how to recognize what's normal, that resource guarding is a normal behavior in dogs. I always go to resource guarding, I just think that's a simple one, but all across case types, where you have an opportunity to normalize the way dogs communicate when they need social distance, to normalize behaviors that dogs get part and parcel in the ecogram of dog. And then to know if you don't know how to resolve resource guarding or whatever the case type, refer. So I think
don't inflate how terrible it is just because you don't know how to
because you can't address it and you don't have the understanding of ethology. And I think that's where we're coming with competence with training.
It freaks you out.
Yeah.
Because you're freaked out by it and the client's freaked out by it. Therefore, let's all freak out.
Infecting your clients with FOD because you struggle with FOD and a lack of understanding. It's a really, and I don't say this lightly, so many of my clients are coming to me with that as a past. Luckily, a good number of them will recognize that the person maybe didn't know how to address it. That's why they're with me in the first place. But it's often, and this is I know it's a topic for another session, but that's a lot of money and time they spend getting to that, you know, and that's a problem. They could have just referred out right out of the gate. I'm not comfortable with growling dogs. I'm not comfortable with fear and aggression. I don't know how to address resource guard. I don't know that they always know. So they give them stuff they got off the internet or in Facebook groups with other dog training, with other dog trainers. And then again, when it doesn't work, you didn't do it right. You know, you blame the client, blame the dog. And then it's discharged off of your conscience. You've done no wrong. And I think that's a big problem. And I think that's part of the reason.
The client is so often the convenient scapegoat. I mean, I think sometimes it's very tough to blame oneself or one's knowledge set. I think we also sometimes we're not, but sometimes we're uncomfortable blaming the dog. You know, in other words, there are no bad dogs because we tend to be dog oriented. And so that leaves the client as the only culprit, you know. Or prior training, some prior trainer said to do this. And sometimes that is an issue because it certainly wears the client down, but sometimes it's not the issue. In other words, the prior client, trainer did this, therefore it's now an unsolvable case. And I mean, I just, Yeah, so anything else about efficiency? I mean, I know we're sort of efficiency freaks because that's just our culture here, is that we very much, are aware how limited the clients is. And that's a problem for us. That's not sort of, okay, it's a bad client. That's a normal human. And it's our responsibility to get good at that. You said something about uncomfortableness, Lisa, and it just made me think about, imagine if there was a veterinarian who was uncomfortable with surgery, would you want that client doing your dog's spay? Probably not. You want, they should do things that they are comfortable doing.
Right.
So how about counseling? So people very often come to us distraught. And so, we normalize for the people who may be overreacting. And then we also do wake-up calls for people who are underreacting. And that means telling the difference when people are maybe not taking things seriously and they need a wake-up call, or people are overreacting and they need, sort of a course of normalization. Do you see that in your practices?
daily, probably. Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, usually these are very emotional things, right? So when you have a dog growling at something and you don't understand that, or they bit someone and they, like they can't move through their home without some behaviors that are concerning, like, they can't leave the house and go out into public. So it's an emotional thing. And so people do sometimes they don't understand it. And the internet, again, is like, I just said this morning, but the internet is a terrifying place right now for dogs and for dog guardians. And so you go out, and as soon as we start dealing with anything like, growling, biting, all of these things, of course, most people are, even if it's something minor, it becomes a really big deal. And I totally understand that. And sometimes I see the flip side where there is something that, like it's a major deal and it's very downplayed.
They're
So
minimizing.
we've got to go in and sort of, I think part of competency is going in and seeing the forest through the trees. We have to be able to kind of, hear what they're saying and pick out the parts that we're going to be, and Jean, you teach us this very well, that like if somebody comes to us with a laundry list of issues, our job is to find the ones that we're going to start working on right away. And so there's this,
And why?
we're yeah, and if you can normalize and wipe some of those things, sometimes people are so relieved to just hear like it's normal that my dog, doesn't want to share their food with all of the dogs at the dog park or whatever it might be. Like, whew,
Not that
what a
it's not the
relief.
tip of an iceberg, and then
Yeah,
if we let it go, that it's going to somehow then infect other things.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
I think too that
Another
we
thing,
have,
I mean, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, I think like when we deal with things and we're talking bigger topics like fear and aggression, we do have criteria to look at to understand the severity. We always understand what normal behavior is, at least, at least as an academy grad, I'm fortunate to have that deep dive into evolutionary biology and kind of getting a good sense of that. But one of the things we have is a those prognostic indicators to look at to know, is this a case we should be taking? Is this something that's amenable? What is the ABI? What is the pressure with which the dog bites when they do? What are the triggers? Client compliance being one of the primary prognostic indicators when we take these cases. The only times, and I am not a fire your client kind of gal. It's been very few cases. I want to say
Me neither.
three
Are you
cases.
amazed? Like, I'm amazed at the amount, I mean, there's trainers out there who are constantly firing clients, and I'm thinking, maybe
Constantly.
I've just been lucky, but I often sort of wonder about the common denominator there, which is just that practitioner seems to fire a lot of clients.
Yes, and I think I fired 3 clients in the history of
Yeah.
dog educated. In all of those cases, it was after ample efforts, and it was always 100% of the time, it was in the case of large dog, hard mouth, absolute lack of management in spite of week after week counseling intensely that this dog cannot have access to people coming into the property.
Yeah. And then everybody's
Dog
well,
bit.
everybody's at risk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, at that point, and in all of those cases, they were using aversives as well, which was exacerbating the case. But there's plenty of people who've been using aversives that I didn't fire because of aversives. It's always, what is the risk to the community? What is the risk to people? And it's not like oh, you failed on me once, it's over. We talk about it because I need them to understand that how critical that management piece is in a dog that has a bite history with maiming force bites. And if I can, and by the way, I don't just abandon them altogether. I do discharge to usually a veterinarian behaviorist if possible, because, I'm hoping the white coat effect will step in and they'll listen to them.
Yeah.
I do not want to be the trainer of record. But again, when you think about the number of cases that I take versus the number I've discharged,
That you fired. Yeah.
it's not even 1%. And yet
Yeah.
there are people who fire person after person after person. Same with kicking people out of class. There are people I've rolled into private training just because the dog would do better outside of the classroom environment. But I don't fire people. I want to say maybe once every 2 years, we'll get somebody who maybe is is an especially difficult person that has nothing to do with the class. Maybe they're just struggling with mental health issues. The only time I've ever discharged a person from a class or not had them come back from additional classes is when they've posed a problem, the human, for the other humans in the room, where they've made it difficult. And again, we're talking once every 2 years that might happen. And I'm very gentle and I'm very careful to roll them into private. I don't understand, these people are constantly kicking people out of their classes.
And that can be a competence clue, because it can be very tough to sort of tease apart. Okay, if it's not going well, is it our competence? Is it the technique choice? Is it the dog? Is it the issue? Is it compliance? So if it's not working, how do you then diagnose that? And that you got to be able to self-anthropologize. You've got to,
be able to read people and kind of get a sense for, can I coach this and have them remain in this situation, or can I, what needs to happen? But that's our job. It's such a critical part of our job to be able to counsel the owners. They
rule out so that when it's not working, one of the things that we can rule out is I can't, I wasn't able to sort of parse this case, and I wasn't able to parse the counseling. So at least we can move that off the table and then say, okay, now here's the remaining, candidates.
Some of that seems to me to be a bit. Sorry, go ahead, Lisa.
No, I was just saying, it's just not something that happens frequently. I do it so
frequency is a clue.
Yeah, I think that's it. And it's how judicious I am about it. It's not just willy-nilly. I and there are times where I am kind of surfing the burnout thing. So certainly when my bandwidth is lesser, I may be more apt to, but still the fact that it only happens once a year, once every 2 years, I think, and there are cases, I don't just throw it to the wind and say, I'm done with this. I really put thought into it. These people are coming to me, they have dogs that need help. And they need understanding. And sometimes it's difficult, but you find a way to support people unless they are blatantly, and that's, like I said, over the course of years or whatever, I think there's been 3 cases where they're causing a safety issue for their community, and I can't be the trainer of record. That's 3 in the course of almost a decade. Come on, people are doing 3 clients a month. They're firing out there, and I don't get it. I don't get it.
I think in one sense, just that's coming to me as I listen to you guys who take a lot more clients than me, obviously, is there's something to be said for like standard operating procedures also applies to how we funnel clients into our services, so it's like, well, of course you're gonna have to fire someone if they bring an older dog into your puppy class, but you should be screening, or dogs who are really inappropriate for class. Your marketing materials should make that kind of clear. I think that part of competence is like the business end competence too, is making sure that people are getting, and I see some, so when I've heard of people who are kicked out of class, in some cases it was that their dog just legitimately shouldn't have been in the class in the first place, for whatever reason. And I think that, obviously some people are like,
there's the screening.
Yeah.
Right. Even when it does pass that, when I have removed dogs from class, it's never been to abandon them and say, you're just not okay here. And I've seen that a lot locally. It's to say, this isn't the right environment. This isn't the right forum
now for your dog. Yeah.
Right, but we're going to roll that cost, and it costs me money because now I've lost the class spot and they've already paid. So I roll them into private training or a different class, depending. But we've set it up so hopefully those things don't happen in the screening process, the onboarding process. And then if it does happen, though, it's not just a sorry, too bad. It's okay, how can I support you and your dog's needs? And let's now move it this way. And that needs to also be accounted for in the business plan because it's going to happen on occasion. So.
Yeah, I think there are certainly people who just don't know. People are terrible, myself included, at reading onboarding things online. But yeah, I do. I sort of have I fear, I worry. I think it's a competence flag. If you see someone who is teaching a class for all dogs of all ages, and there's no sort of, does your dog fit the scope of this class kind of.
Yeah. I'm very critical about, I think it's critical. So I'm very thoughtful about puppy classes more than anything. Yeah. basic skills. We can always move people into a, reactive dog class if we need to, if we're dealing with such severe barrier frustration or whatever. But puppy classes, there's a cutoff age for a reason. I have it well staffed with multiple assistants. I want it
And
to
it's
be
not, and you're not using your newest entry level trainers because puppy class is quote unquote easy. It's not easy.
Oh, yeah, no, I think it's critical, because first of all,
The
nobody's more
responsibility,
anxious than a
the
puppy
burden
owner,
of responsibility is so great in puppy class because of what we're trying to achieve.
right?
Yeah,
And
the
yeah, Emily, you were
competency that
saying, go
Well, the
ahead.
competency that I hear when we talk like outside of these sessions, when we're like we're chatting about what we're gonna, discuss and things like that, like the way that you just talk about your puppy classes, Lisa, is like a huge breath of fresh air because like the amount of care and effort that you're putting into making sure that those little baby puppies are being set up for success is like, I wish everybody holding puppy classes would do that because so many clients come to me and they have a dog who is a year and a half or 2 years old who has major issues. And when we start talking about like, when did the issues show up? A lot of them showed up with issues in puppy class. And maybe they got booted out of puppy class, or like we were saying before, they got like put behind a screen and kind of like just feed
And
treats over here in
the
the
puppy
corner.
class didn't help and may
They
have
didn't
hurt.
help. And
Well, nothing was
there was
addressed.
obviously a flag that there was a problem,
And you
but
have a
nobody
trainer with a puppy.
with a,
Yeah, but I think
It's
that's part of
the
the problem. Not all
opportunity of a trainer
trainers,
with a puppy. Because
like
and they
if
don't
I could
have
send
behavior background.
if I could go back in time and send
yeah.
every client to your puppy class, I would not have a client anymore.
Yeah.
Like I
You
would
would, you would have
not
you would
like
have extra classes full of chow puppies.
Seriously, the things that come up in puppy class, especially after week 1 with puppies, people will line up. I have to be careful to not schedule another class or private right after puppy class, because I know people will be holding their puppies, lining up, ready to ask questions. Nobody's more stressed out than I make a joke about it at orientation for kindergarten. It's the best time because these puppies are precious and fun and what a wonderful time, but it's also really stressful because doing it right, doing it well, knowing we're setting these
Huge
animals up
responsibility.
for success for the rest of their lives, but also dealing with, fur balls with teeth coming at us and constant peeing in the house. And it's a load. And puppy owners tend to be anxious. They have behavior questions, and we need to know, what can we reassure them about? How can we pinpoint what we really need them to focus on and make sure we're counseling them in that? And then, Emily, like you said, I've had puppies with some beyond typical fear, where, yes, we will absolutely remove them just for the sense of safety from the group play early on. But the very first thing I'm going to do when that class is over is I'm going to find maybe some older puppies that are very gentle, whatever that puppy needs, I'm going to arrange.
And you know what it is. You
Yeah,
know
I'm
what the
going
puppy
to
needs.
do
You
it.
can
You're not
tease
just
what the puppy
leaving
needs
them.
out from all the other chaff.
Yep.
And then convey that to the owner in a sensitive manner they're going to hear, and then you can orchestrate it. And I mean, those are all skills that that are basic skills that we need to do our jobs. Can we talk a little bit about burnout? Which
Yes,
comes
we
up in
can.
all these sort of competence sort of it comes up because we have clients who have spent thousands, sometimes on incompetent previous practitioners. They're on their last breath, they're on their last dollar. They get finally to the competent trainer. And Lisa, you were saying you get to these people, and at that point, they say, I can't afford any more. You're my last hope. You need to now weigh in for free, and the burnout burden that imposes on you.
I'd say about 50% of my private training clients are either grossly discounted, like huge discounts, or free. They tend to be, well, some of those are because they're rescue
You need to
dogs.
have a talk.
Yeah, I know. And it is bad, and it does contribute to my burnout.
I should talk. I just have them do donations, but it's different because I'm not set up the way you are to do it. So I have a better
It's hard
excuse.
because I make a lot less money than you might think looking at my website.
Mm.
I don't ask that of of the other trainers, Elisa and Allison, who work with me. I don't ask that of them. I will often discount their sessions so that only what they're taking, like so that the dog educated percent is not used. But it's a difficult position to be in, But I also come from a very much a rescue and welfare background, and I worry. And I
Do-gooding.
worry when these are clients that they really do care. But it is frustrating. It is frustrating that you had a couple $1,000s to spend on an incompetent, uneducated trainer who, insulted you and your dog.
And didn't get the job done.
And didn't get the job done, and now I'm doing it at a grossly discounted rate or free of charge. And it might be because they go to my favorite vet or something like that. I do my best to accommodate, but it wears thin. Even if they're paying full amount for my services, the burnout potential.
Sometimes you have to undo, you have to kind of very diplomatically. I mean, one of the things we were talking beforehand is, can we call garbage garbage? I mean, if a client was given garbage by it might be a well-meaning trainer, it's not necessarily aversive. It can be incompetence on our side. And we say over and over, incompetent positive reinforcement trainers do us no favors. And one of the ways that they don't do us favors is garbage, is, a client spends thousands on garbage. And then now we've got a worn down client who's more pessimistic about their dog, etc. And, sometimes is unwilling to continue to pay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't blame them. If I may, I did have a client in the past year that came to my class after having gone to 3 different local force-free trainers, multiple classes, dog's like 2 years old now. And making a very long story short, on week 2, this dog was just a little bit too much to play for the 2 dogs that remained. So I said, come next week when the dog that was out will be back, who's better off to play with your kind of more high energy playing dog. But as I was walking her out so the other 2 could play, I just told her, you're doing an amazing job. Your dog is lovely and your dog is a good player. I wanted to make sure she knew that the dog was a great player, but the other 2 were just shy and unpadded. So I really wanted to wait until they came back. It was just a very brief exchange, and I just took a moment to tell her what a great job she's doing, what a great dog her dog is, that his play is normal, but it's just too much for this dog. She came back the next week. The dog was there, the dog that her dog could play with. We had them separated, the rough ones, and we always like to say some like the club and some like the pub. And so we had them separated, and I had assistants here. And she took me aside just to thank me. She took me aside and said, I just want to thank you that carried me through the whole week. You were so kind to me, that you told me I was doing a good job and that my dog was a good boy. And I was kind of taken off guard. And it wasn't until later at the end of the course where she kind of explained what she meant, that she'd been to so many trainers. One of those trainers had on week 1 lined up all the people with their dogs and went down the line and told each one of them what was wrong with their dog and why they were to blame. And that's a force-free trainer, which made my hair catch fire. Another person told them that their dog doesn't care about what he's doing to other dogs, and people, making it sound like the dog was somehow deviant and naughty. He was just kind of a high energy doodle. It just broke my heart a little. And this was a great owner.
And so here we have trainers doing this kind of stuff, and then they come to us and we are trying to be diplomatic.
Yeah.
And not
I was very careful
we have to apologize kind of for our profession, but we don't want to be undiplomatic and say, your last trainer really didn't know what they were doing. So we're trying very hard to be diplomatic, and I worry about the burnout burden of all of that.
Yeah, and I would never have said, oh, I'm sorry you had crap trainers. I was very careful. But what I did do was make sure I reinforced the fact that she really is doing. This was a client who showed up every week, who's got every possible enrichment opportunity on board during the week. The dog goes to daycare. He's just a lot of dog. He's a big dog and he's a lot of dog, but he couldn't be more pro-social. I will tell you, he's not an easy dog, just because he's so big and amped up. And but the difference between that dog from week 1 to the end, he wasn't barking through the whole class anymore, and you could hear a pin drop by week 6. She was that kind of client who would take everything you gave her and run with it, full compliance. And some people, when their dog barks, they're embarrassed and ashamed, and we have to kind of coach them in handling it. She never once was like, stop, She was never harsh with that dog. She was, I know I'm blathering about this, but she's an example of a client who shows up every week, eager to work, puts herself out there, knows that her dog's the loud one in the room, but still shows up. She did everything for that dog possible. The dog has a wonderful life. The dog did make some major gains in our classroom, which she was thrilled about. But she had a history of 3 different trainers, 6 different classes in this dog's life since it was a puppy. And every one she left feeling worse about herself and her dog, but she kept trying. And this was a person who was just looking for help. And the dog wasn't a bad dog, and she was an amazing owner, but that's what we deal with. And I think that's why it matters. That's why it matters that we know how to counsel people, we know how to coach people. Nobody should come here to Dog Educated and thank me for being kind. Our job is not to
Yeah.
stand and punish people for everything they're doing wrong. Our job is to find the good bits, reinforce those, and then help shape them into the things that they need. And just a message out there. I know I'm a little emotional today, but just a message out there to any dog trainers. If you are firing, or if you're failing puppies out of kindergarten, and I get that a lot, people will be like, yeah, he failed out of kindergarten, or yeah, she failed out of her last class. We're talking about baby organisms that have been on the planet a matter of weeks. If you're failing them out of kindergarten, that is a practitioner failure. Your job is to support folks and help them get where they need to be. I try not to scan and punish other trainers. I do my best. This is a caveat for me, though. If you're failing people and dogs out of puppy classes and basic skills classes, you need to look inward, because they should be leaving there with some degree of success. They should be leaving your training classes feeling good about themselves and their dogs. And if you're not doing that, then you might need a little bit of help in learning how to coach people, counsel people, and get them where they need to be.
And have a curriculum that's good. I mean,
Yeah.
there sometimes the whole business of not keeping up. That's another thing that I think we had on our agenda for just this whole series was, making sure that we are up to the minute on the research topics, not just with training methods and so on, but things like socialization, and some of the trends, and how best to counsel people.
Yeah, it sounds like, I mean, some of these trainers, like, it's a puppy. What could possibly go wrong? Like, I'm safe to take puppies, or I'm safe to take basics. Well, a lot can go wrong. And you have to be, even though it seems like it's simple, it's not simple.
And it's so important. It's it's just the burden is greater because you've got a puppy, and
Yeah.
so many important things need to be done, and we mustn't waste time. We mustn't I'm constantly worried about when puppies and the people saying, yeah, we're gonna start on socialization, in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
I'm like, in a couple of weeks he's going to be 2 weeks older. And I try to light a fire under them. But then there's other things where they think it's critically important when you have to sort of, hey, okay, no, that can wait. What can wait, what
Yeah.
can't wait, and then how to impart that to the person in a way that they're going to not feel, sort of bullied, but they're going to, do what needs to be done.
Our job is to make sure that they're having the best possible life with their dogs, and their dogs are having
That's
the best
it.
possible life moving forward. And I think that's another thing when I do classes. I'm really thoughtful about who teaches the classes, and I've got assistants that are so rock solid. I would put my assistants up against most dog trainers out there any day. They're really thoughtful, and they're so good at dealing with people and with dogs, and they can train their butts off. The reason I have only the trainers in the class answering behavior questions is because there is that education. And to me, that matters, because as you go through the room, whether it's puppy class or basic skills, people are going to have off the cuff questions about things. And we've talked about that before. My dog, I went to take my dog, my dog got a hold of a slipper. I went to take it away, and he bit me. It didn't break the skin. Any number of things where people are worried and they have questions, that I want to be. It's not just we're installing some basic skills, whether it's puppy class or basic skills. There are people who come to you with questions. And I think it's important that the person who instructs the class, or there at least be one person in that room who can triage If this needs to be basic, if this needs to be private training or, a longer conversation even, or if it can just be, here's some quick tips. It matters. So I want to make sure always that whoever's teaching, it's not just, oh, they're just doing basic skills, so it doesn't matter that they don't have behavior depth trainers, other trainers. It does matter because questions come up from clients in those classes, and they need to know how to triage them. They need to know whether or not they're out of their depth in addressing it. I mean, any of the assistants that have been here have heard me cover so much, they could probably do it themselves. But there's these differences, my dog's barking constantly from home. Well, how we address it matters. Is it attention seeking, so to speak? Is it boredom barking? Is it alert barking, alarm barking? We need to know what's causing the dog to bark so that we know how to address it. So I don't like folks giving out behavior advice in my classes unless they've been certified and they have gone through the program. So that's why I'm rambling. I'm sorry. This topic today is really important to me. It really is. It's my life.
Well, it's an important topic.
I could just listen to you ramble all day, to be honest. It's very cathartic for me.
Like, I feel like we all, as competent trainers, need to really take up that march that Lisa said with puppy classes and puppy class instructors. I think that's super important. I hadn't thought about it in those terms before you brought that up. I don't know, a couple of years ago, at least the first time when it was eye-opening to me to be like, yeah, that's absolutely the truth. The puppy class is not where, like Jean said, where you get your feet wet.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you got to be able to design the curriculum and then deliver it, and then field, as Lisa's been saying so well, field all those questions.
I think one of the things that keeps coming up in my head as we talk about competence in counseling is a conversation, Jean, you and I had a couple of years ago about evolution and domestication, and we learn about that in the academy, and I was sort of asking you, what are your thoughts on how important is that for someone? Does every trainer need to actually know and understand evolution? We all do, and I think we're all fascinated by evolution, and I think so it's not like, I don't think that was a big burden on any of us but I was like, is there a case, just as a thought exercise, is there a case for a trainer who doesn't actually need to understand how behavior is a product of evolution and domestication, when they're dealing with dogs? And we were like, maybe I think it was in a blog we were doing, maybe like a sports trainer who just does agility or something. Maybe they don't actually need to understand evolution, but to me, that's one of those marks of competence is yes, you can answer a question with, well, when barking comes up, I blah, blah, blah. But I think that there's also this foundational knowledge of why do dogs do that, which really gets at how we help them in some cases. And you can't decide which cases it matters and doesn't unless you understand it.
Yeah, and that's the thing is sort of you have a really good understanding of general principles, and then also have standard operating procedures. They're not mutually exclusive, and know when to deploy which.
Mm-hmm.
And what sometimes I think we see out there is people who have a standard operating procedure or two that they might use as a panacea, but they don't have good general knowledge to be able to then deploy that, or they've got some general book knowledge about principles, and then they just kind of can offload that to the client, but they haven't got good operating procedures and they're missing. So it's kind of this pieced together mosaic that sometimes they have enough and sometimes they don't, but it's almost never comprehensive, and it's not almost never sort of well integrated, and it's tough because our profession is complex.
Yeah.
And
I know
those
we
are the
talked about
things.
fads. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Emily.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I know we've talked about fads quite a bit, but I think fad resistance, which is important for dogs, comes from deeper knowledge.
Yeah.
Those things like the evolutionary biology and like all of those things in the academy, there was a lot of things that I loved learning them, but maybe at the time I was like, oh, like
This is relevant.
Yeah, there's so much stuff, and like I just want to get to the chase, right? Those are the things that I rely on so heavily now in my day-to-day practice, and I'm so glad. Now looking back, there's times where I'm like, I'm so glad that I feel in many ways like we were forged in fire. Like we,
deep normalizing.
Did quadrants make us all cry? Probably. Like did, even just like understanding
the interaction
like,
between
bias and like evolutionary biology.
Conditioning.
Yeah,
those are the
those are the things now that I'm like so grateful to have under my belt. And no client will see that. Like they won't see that, but they do reap the benefits of it. So
That's why,
Final
and
thoughts.
that is why I don't have assistants until they finish the program. And then of course there are trainers kind of address those things. I think I don't think people realize till they come out on the other end how deep, how layered, and that you're able to, in a matter of seconds, draw from all of that and give people what they need and only what they need.
Yeah. Boy, is
Very,
that ever
very
the most, well, give
it's
people
a
what they
skill
need and
that's
only
makes
what they need. Oh man, I tell you, that's one of the things that keeps me up at night is the reports to clients that I see where there is a key piece of information, but it's buried. Um, and they said, did you do this thing? And they said, what thing? And they didn't even see it because it was, buried in a
On page 4.
long, kind of long prose. Yeah. Yeah, final thoughts on it. I mean, my biggest worry is dog trainer burnout. And helping, the good guys not burn out, and the people who might be burned, and sometimes people will burn out because they're not up to the job, and other times I think people are up to the job, but the burden on them is great from some of the things we've been talking about. They're the third or fourth trainer, and the client is now worn down. How do you
and
guys
on top of
how
that,
do you guys stay in the game?
have stuff. Well, on top of that, you have clients that came to you and you're taking on as normal clients, but just the general everyday what makes this job so hard. Maybe they've come with a history of being shocked within an inch of their sanity, or maybe they have dogs, they're this close to euthanizing. All of that stuff is still there. So when they come to us having had a bad experience with what should be one of the good guys, I think it's just it's like adding insult to injury. You're like, can we at least have the good guys get it right? And I think that's kind of a critical thing. I'd like to see people stop pretending to be experts in things they're not. Nobody should be telling, no trainer should be telling a person, an owner, not to use meds that a vet prescribed. Are you kidding me? They shouldn't be diagnosing things that trainers have no business, let alone an uneducated trainer. And nobody should be making people leave feeling worse about themselves and their dogs. Our job is to kind of meet them where they are, wherever that is. It's to me, I think it's a little bit of I think it's kind of a horror for anybody to walk away feeling bad about themselves, like there's something wrong with them, there's something wrong with their dog because the trainer didn't know better.
Yeah, sometimes people take abuse from dog trainers. They wouldn't take it from the bank teller or from the landscaper, but for some reason they feel sheepish and are willing to take poor treatment from dog trainers, and I wish that would stop.
gaslighting. It's because
It is
those
gaslighting.
guys, they're able to spin it and make and we're dealing with like living things. So the guilt is so strong if we feel like we screw it up. And they're changing the narrative about what's going on. So they're just getting gaslit.
Yeah.
To answer your question about how I stay in the game, this helps me, surrounding yourself with like-minded people,
Community.
building community. I would not be able to do it if it wasn't for you, all of you, and like all of my training friends they're all like internet based, but like even this summer or this, I guess, what was it, November, we got to meet everybody, a lot of people in person at a conference. I followed Lisa around like a lost puppy. I was like, I just felt like
I loved every minute of the time.
I just felt like I had like, I was finally around my people and I just ate it up and I couldn't
Everybody needs, we're a
it.
very tribal species. We need to have community.
Yeah.
We need to, yeah.
I mean, I've got my dog educated family in addition to having my trainer family, and they keep me in the game and they make me feel less alone in the world. And they care deeply about dogs and their people. I chose really well.
And good self-care.
Really good
Yes.
self-care outside of it, the best you can do when you can do it. And also I remember early on when I first started doing classes, and I think it's worth telling this little story, when I first was going to do my very first dog training class as dog educated, and I reached out to Christy, who had started doing it before me, like a year before me, and said, I was I was so scared. And I'm like, any advice, any tips? And she gave me just some really good pinpointing tips. And one of the things that she said to me that sticks with me to this day is be nice. Be nice to people because you might be the only person that week who is nice to them. Smile at people, make a joke, even if it's a silly joke. People experience warmth, and that's a good thing. And you, by the way, are an expert. You have this knowledge. You can help them. Don't ever forget that. Give them what they need. Be kind about doing it. And when we had to close down because of COVID, I thought about that a lot. I missed being in the classroom. I missed helping people. I missed that relationship of, I missed the humor and the warmth and the kindness, which all kind of started because I had that conversation with Christy very early on that not everybody is nice to them in the real world. They're there because they need help. Be nice to them. And it's not forced. I like people. So I enjoy it, but even the difficult people, you can usually find a way there if you just extend a little empathy, a little humor. You can usually make your way through. That's why I don't fire clients. I don't have to.
And I think if you're competent and knowledgeable and well educated and have good experience, it's much easier to be kind because you can get stuff done. You know? So I think
you're not in that cognitive dissonance thing of this is not going well. I need to find somebody to blame here. Me, the dog, or the client.
Yeah. We can be gentle with our clients, even if they're doing something wrong. Like dealing with clients who are maybe doing something wrong is the competence issue on our part as trainers. Mostly. Like, yes, there are cases where blah, but they're rare. Like Lisa said, Lisa sees hundreds of people.
And I'd say less than 1%, are fireable. And usually that's where there's a danger issue at risk. And I don't want to be the, And that's, it takes some serious bite cases and I take some serious history, but if the client is compliant, if they're tight with the management, if they have empathy for their dog, then I'm there for them.
And it's not saying that you need to take, I'm not saying you need to take every case. Referring when you don't like a case type, or you can tell you're going to clash with a human, that's a sign of competence in my opinion too, but you know.
I'm so glad you said that because I sometimes I think, gosh, the only case I want to keep my hand in the game rather than just teaching. And so I do chows, but all I do is chows, and occasionally I'll do chow adjacent, but mostly it's just chows. But I sort of think, well, it's because but they're difficult, they're difficult cases. They're usually difficult cases. But I sort of think, well, it's my wheelhouse now, so and I don't feel bad about staying in my wheelhouse.
It's
and
okay the more competent trainers that are around us, the more we can feel comfortable referring, and the happier.
And I should say this is going to help me sleep at night. Is that a lot of other trainers don't want to do the chows, so I'll take the the reject.
They don't understand them.
I'll take the reject. I'll take the chow rejects that they didn't want.
I love you guys.
You guys are awesome. Oh, okay. Well, happy holidays to everybody. We will be back in a couple of weeks. I don't have the date off the top of my head, but it's
January 8th.
2 or 3 weeks. January 8th, with our next installment, which is going to be one I think where we're going to allow ourselves a little bit of free reign to wail. So
unfortunately, I did that today. So I'll let you guys.
Oh, you weren't wailing.
I'll be the voice of gentle.
Oh no, that's not wailing. You don't know what wailing is.
I can rant. I'm geared up. I'm ready.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.